One afternoon in ancient Egypt cost humanity 500 years of human progress. Not a war, not a plague, not a conquest. One fire. And we are still living in the aftermath today. Imagine for a moment the world you were born into. Every hospital, every vaccine, every satellite orbiting overhead. And ask yourself a single question. What if none of it was late? What if all of it arrived 1,000 years ago? That is not a fantasy. That is a calculation. And it begins here, in Alexandria, Egypt, in a building that should have changed everything. The Library of Alexandria was not just a library. That word does not do it justice. It was the internet of the ancient world. A single institution storing the collected knowledge of every civilization on Earth simultaneously. Greek philosophy, Egyptian mathematics, Babylonian astronomy, Persian medicine, Indian geometry, Chinese engineering. Every breakthrough, every discovery, every hard-won insight from every culture that had ever written anything down. Scholars estimated between 400,000 and 700,000 individual scrolls inside those walls. Works we will never read. Experiments we will never replicate. Names we will never know. Gone. But before they were gone, consider what they produced. Eratosthenes worked inside that library in 240 BC. Using 2 sticks, 2 shadows, and pure mathematics, he calculated the circumference of the Earth. He got it almost exactly right, 2,000 years before Columbus needed a map. Archimedes developed the foundations of calculus inside those walls. Foundations that Sir Isaac Newton would independently rediscover 1,800 years later and receive full credit for. Hero of Alexandria built a functioning steam engine inside that city. A rotating bronze sphere powered by steam. A working prototype of the machine that would eventually drag humanity out of subsistence farming and into the modern industrial world. He built it in 100 AD. The Industrial Revolution, the actual one, happened in 1760. Hero of Alexandria had a working steam engine 1,660 years earlier, and the knowledge died. So here is the question, the one historians whisper about, the one almost nobody has fully mapped. What if it didn't? What if the library survived? Not just the building, but the tradition, the funding, the scholars, the accumulation, the compounding. What does the world look like right now?
The answer will make you uncomfortable. Because we can actually calculate it. With the library intact, Hero's steam engine doesn't die as a curiosity in a philosopher's workshop. It gets studied, refined, funded. Within 2 to 3 generations, conservatively, someone attaches it to a wheel, then a cart, then a ship, then an entire logistics network. The Roman Empire, already the greatest engineering and logistics civilization in human history, now has access to mechanical power at the height of its reach. Roman roads were already the most sophisticated transportation infrastructure the world had ever seen. Add steam power to Roman roads, and you do not get a slightly better empire. You get an industrial revolution 17 centuries early. We are now in roughly 200 AD, and Rome has proto-trains. Think about what that means. Roman supply lines that could move armies across continents in days. Roman factories producing goods at mechanical scale.
Roman engineers iterating on steam power for generation after generation. By 300 AD, that technology looks nothing like Hero's bronze sphere. By 400 AD, it looks like nothing we have a word for yet. Now consider medicine. The library housed medical texts from Egypt, Greece, and Persia, representing nearly 1,000 years of accumulated clinical observation. Detailed records of what worked, what failed, what killed, and what healed. Much of this was lost. The result was catastrophic. Europe spent most of the next 12 centuries treating disease with prayers, superstition, and bloodletting. When the Black Death arrived in 1347, a bacterial infection spread by fleas on rats, European medicine had no conceptual framework to even understand what was happening, let alone stop it. 1 in 3 Europeans died. The ancient texts already contained proto-germ theory. The idea that invisible particles caused disease appears in Roman and Indian medical writing centuries before the library fell. Cross-pollinated through Alexandria, developed, tested, refined. That knowledge reaches practical application 1,000 years earlier. Basic sanitation protocols, quarantine procedures, the conceptual foundation for vaccination, already practiced in China, spreads west through the library's network. In this timeline, the Black Death is a regional outbreak, not a continental catastrophe that kills 25 million people and reshapes the political map of an entire civilization. Now, consider navigation. Eratosthenes proved the Earth was round and measured it accurately in 240 BC. That knowledge survived in fragments, but in our timeline, it was partially lost, repeatedly doubted, and not acted upon decisively until Columbus in 1492, a full 17 centuries after Eratosthenes did the math. In the alternate timeline, Greek and Roman navigators have accurate globe knowledge by 300 AD, better ships by 400 AD, deep ocean sailing capability by 450 AD. They reach the Americas by 500 AD at the latest, not as conquistadors, not with guns, smallpox, and the explicit mission of extraction and enslavement, but as traders, making first contact with civilizations that in our timeline would have another 1,000 years to develop in complete isolation. The entire colonial era, the transatlantic slave trade, the systematic genocide of indigenous peoples across 2 continents, the extraction economies that still shape global inequality in the 21st century, potentially never happens in any form we would recognize. This is the piece most people miss entirely. The library was not just storing individual discoveries. It was storing the habit of science, the culture of inquiry, the institutional practice of writing things down, challenging assumptions, building on what came before. Peer review before peer review had a name. When it fell, Europe did not just lose knowledge. It lost the infrastructure for generating new knowledge.
The Dark Ages were not dark because people became stupid. They were dark because the system for producing intellectual progress collapsed. And systems, once collapsed, take centuries to rebuild. With the library surviving, that system never collapses. Progress is continuous, unbroken, compounding across every generation. The Renaissance, which in our timeline was simply Europeans rediscovering Greek and Roman texts they had lost access to, does not need to happen as a rediscovery, because nothing was ever lost. Historians and scientists who study technological acceleration suggest that unbroken compounding progress from 200 AD onward
would place human development somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 years ahead of where we currently stand. Run that calculation. By the year 1000 AD in our calendar, this alternate civilization is where we are today. Antibiotics, flight, global communication, nuclear energy. By 1500 AD, they are where we will be in 2500. By our present day, in 2025, they are 1,000 years beyond us. The diseases that were never necessary, the famines that were never inevitable, the wars fought over resources that technology had already made irrelevant, the billions of human beings who suffered and died for want of knowledge that already existed, locked in a building that nobody decided was worth protecting. Because here is the truth, and it is darker than the fire. The Library of Alexandria did not burn in one dramatic afternoon. The single fire story is almost certainly a myth. The real story is worse. Far worse. It declined, slowly, over centuries. It was damaged and partially rebuilt, defunded and partially restored, neglected and quietly abandoned. Scholars stopped coming because the funding dried up. Scrolls rotted because nobody paid for the maintenance. The collection shrank year by year, decade by decade, in a long, slow diminishment that nobody declared and nobody mourned and nobody even fully noticed until it was simply gone. It died because no single generation decided it was important enough to protect. Funding got cut. Priorities shifted. Scrolls rotted. Not with a bang, with a long, slow, institutional shrug that echoed across 20 centuries. And if that sounds familiar, if that pattern resonates with anything you have read recently about universities losing funding, research institutions closing, digital archives disappearing, public libraries shuttering, that is not a coincidence being pointed out. That is a pattern being identified. Every generation inherits accumulated knowledge. Every generation decides, through its funding decisions, its political priorities, its collective attention, what it considers worth preserving. Most generations do not make that decision consciously. They make it by default, by distraction, by assuming someone else is taking care of it. The question was never really, what if the Library of Alexandria was never burned? The real question, the one that should keep you up at night, is this: what are we letting burn right now? Slowly, quietly, without a single flame. Think about that. If you want to know which single historical decision came even closer to erasing everything we know, that story is next week. Subscribe to Rift Timeline. The next rift is already open.
The Dark Ages were not dark because people became stupid.
They were dark because the system for producing intellectual progress collapsed. And systems, once collapsed, take centuries to rebuild. With the library surviving,